Oh. 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 Everybody's dancing is gonna have their little lips.
Right?
The women connected in wisdom lips, yeah, and the shoulder
You
roll.
know, yes, and I'm thinking that
Mm,
when we this year our conference is probably going to be virtual still because we're not
yeah,
kind of sure what's going on, but
yeah,
I think when we're in person, which may be 2024 or at
mhm,
the latest 2025, I
right.
think we need to do a flash mob for a Women Connecting Wisdom song. Wouldn't that be fun?
I've been
Like
waiting
and
for a
have
long time to do a flash mob.
and have Sati Mara teach us some dances. Just so you know, as you
Mm,
listen to this recording, Sati, we're signing you
yeah,
up
yeah.
because we love to do the unity and that. Like I
Yeah,
think that would be a blast.
the
Hello,
knowledge and
my
the
friend.
wisdom. Hello,
How are
beautiful.
you?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here. Episode 99. I keep on thinking about I think we were like in our 50s and we were talking
Mm,
about 14 episodes is the average of how many podcasts, and we
eh,
just keep going up and up, and I feel like I was just talking about being 80 and now we're about to be 100.
right?
Yeah.
99.
Super excited to be here. What
Right?
about you?
Well, I am delighted to be with you. I think we should do the official opening, and
Yes.
then I have a few shout outs I want to give. And
Let's
I
do it.
am super excited about our guest today.
Me too.
So let's kick this off officially.
Yes, yes. Hi, ladies. I am Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial entrepreneur and author, the founder of Shalo Glow, an all natural handmade personal products company that helps you glow from head to toe. I'm your champion for self care, business care, and intentional wellness.
Hi, y'all. I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, Amazon best-selling author, and dancing social worker who helps you upgrade yourself and community care.
Yes, and together we are Women Connected in Wisdom, a podcast rooted in the 8 dimensions of wellness and the co founders of the community.
Right? And we like to get together every week to have intentional conversations about how to be wise in business and wellness and life. Like, how do we do this? And we always learn something from each other and our guests. And
Yeah.
we were having this conversation before the show, like, how long we want to do this? And it's like, as long as we're having fun and learning something, which I don't know about you, Shannon, but the last 98, because today's
Mhm.
99,
It's
the
true.
last 98 episodes, I've learned something. Like,
Yeah.
and as we meet, before the show, we've talked about it before, how we always do pre-production and
Yeah.
we do coffee and chats with our upcoming guests to screen them before we release them to the world for y'all.
Yes.
And it's always, I don't know, it's to me, it's always inspiring. It's just incredible the work
Yeah.
that is being done out here in the world. So,
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's to the point where I don't know if it's the wisdom that I have, if it's new wisdom that I'm learning along my journey, right?
mhm,
Or if it's all these voices of all the women that we've talked to that have come on the show, that are yet to come on the
right,
show, and different things that I pull from them. Like, where did I get this? It's just all the lines are
right.
starting to cross, because it's been so many, which is great. And that's what I really look forward to continuing to build as we continue to bring more experts on. Is just, you know what? I feel really equipped in all these areas now because I have so
Mm,
many resources, so many people that I've listened to, and so I feel like I have a good foundation of knowledge. Knowledge. I'm looking forward to being there.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I said I wanted to give some shout outs today. So the
What
first
are your
shout
shout
out I
outs?
want to give is to my great Aunt Betty, who is 91 today.
Oh, happy
And I want
birthday.
to say happy birthday, Aunt Betty. And
Yeah.
she just finished reading our book. and was just tickled and was
Yeah.
giving us positive feedback. I gave it to her the last time I was in town because I went and visited her and stayed at her house and gave her a signed copy, and she was just tickled. And then she told me I wanted to finish it before you came back in so I could tell you all about it.
Yeah.
It was really cute, and so she just is a woman of wisdom. Like my great aunt Betty was a professor down in the valley in Texas. And
Mhm.
when I think, and I told her this story recently. So when I was growing up, it wasn't like it is nowadays where you can get any fruit anytime in the grocery store.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, there it wasn't as readily available. And so my great aunt Betty would bring ruby red Texas grapefruit up from the valley, fresh from the trees. I remember she'd bring it in the grapefruit sacks. And
Yeah.
when she would come to visit, she would bring us fresh grapefruit. And so I've always and I love grapefruit and I love the
Mhm.
smell. Like, have you ever had the essential oils where the smell of grapefruit, like it just,
Yes.
I don't know, it brings me joy. And I think about my Aunt Betty. And she loves to read. And I am currently sitting in my cousin John's office and library. So for y'all that see this background, it's not fake that are watching live. I have these beautiful books behind me and a DNA and just I just really wanted to give a shout out, really appreciating all the people who taught me to love to read and how valuable um learning and books and wisdom really is, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
John is my cousin who's a little older than me and loves books and has always loved books and shares them with me and his knowledge, and yeah, so that's how I just have a lot of gratitude for the family that's supporting us on this journey.
Yeah. And especially with our new book coming out, I've been thinking a lot about my journey with books and reading and
Mhm.
all the things that I used to do and places I used to read and stories that I used to enjoy. And when I think about those, and just like your Aunt Betty, bringing those grapefruits at a certain time,
Right,
I think
right.
about getting information in a certain season and how, like our definition that we're about to talk about for intellectual wellness, how it helps the capacity, depending on the season. Certain advice might need to be given a certain way or taken a
Mhm,
certain way, or just because of the context, it might, how do I say? I want to say like land different, or you might understand it differently,
mhm,
So whether it's
mhm.
the grapefruit one year, is it really different than the next year, or is it an experience that you had that made you enjoy it even more, or is it the social connection, or is it
Right,
sometimes you having to hear it again because now if you're in a different position, you can apply it in a different way. And maybe it's relevant for both. I love all the different ways that information and seasons kind of play together to help. Um, the sustainability really of everything that we do.
right, I agree. Yeah, I love that we're talking about intellectual wellness today, and this is where I'm sitting. Like, it really where did you get your love of reading from?
Ooh, where it really, really started, I would have to say probably my dad. I knew it was always important to have education. We would work on my handwriting, making sure that I wrote neat. My penmanship is amazing now, right? I think because of all of that practice. And it wasn't a question if I was going to college, it was just what school. Like, I don't even think
Mhm,
I questioned this.
mhm,
After high school is college, where do I wanna go? What do we have the money for? And that
mhm,
type of thing. I don't remember it, it's kind of like it's always been there. We had the advanced reader programs when I was in elementary school. So you count how many books you're reading or how many pages you're reading. And I remember one time I was in the corner of my classroom, right? And I'm flipping all these pages, not reading it. And this little girl's like, "You're not even reading the book." And I was mad at her as a little kid for being a snitch, right? But she was being honest and I respected that. But it was also interesting the feeling that I had, like, I was missing all the information and the good stuff on the pages, and so I
mm,
knew I was cheating myself, and I think it was there that I said, "You know what? If it's on a book and I'm reading it, I wanna honor the information and go through it. I also wanna read stuff that really interests me," and so I went off on this whole thing with trilogies and of course,
mm,
Harry Potter and Secrets of the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants and Nancy Drew and mystery books and all of the Animorphs and all of these things.
right?
Yeah.
I love it. I want to give one more shout out and one more comment, and then I want to bring our guest up because I want
Let's
to
do
bring
it.
her into this conversation because I'm
Yeah.
realizing what I'm about to say. But the other shout out is for and she's officially a cousin, but she calls me Tia. So
Okay.
John and Maida, my relatives who I'm staying with right now,
Yeah.
they have a grandbaby named Sophia who
Mm.
is 2.5,
Okay.
and she loves to read, and I love
Mm.
to read to her. So like that's one of my, and she brings me like the highlights magazines
Yeah.
and there's another magazine and I'm not remembering it right now, but just the kids stories, and like we
Yeah.
read and read and read, and there's a lot of illustrations in there, and there's a lot of like, oh, let's find this or let's find that. And so I want to introduce our guest because I want to have some more conversations about like reading and illustrations and intellectual learning and all that. Does that
Yeah.
work for you?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm going to give the definition and we can
Let's
bring our
do it.
guest up and go a little bit deeper. Okay,
Let's do
ladies.
it.
So, again, intellectual wellness includes having access to different sources of information and developing critical thinking and timely decision-making skills. Also, continual learning through intentional intellectual growth, situations, and artistic creativity can help maintain one's intellectual capacity.
Oh, I love it. And our
Yeah.
guest is just perfect for this topic today. So,
Yeah.
y'all, our guest Laura uses she, her pronouns and is a visual translator who helps intuitive leaders take complex or mysterious ideas and organize them into understandable visuals to help them boldly take their next steps forward. She loves helping other visually minded humans think and communicate in their own way so they can make an impact in their world. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have this conversation today.
Hi,
Welcome,
Laura.
Laura.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. And
We
I
are
love where
so
this is
delighted that
going.
you're here.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
super excited to have this conversation with you. Like, especially, I try to be both left-brained and right-brained, right? I
Mhm.
know I like to be really detail-oriented, make sure we're effective, but I try to make sure I have fun and creative. So I'm looking forward to your tips and how you balance everything and how you help those of us who might not feel like we're automatically visual learners and
Mm.
thinkers do that better or connect better.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I always talk to people about how the way that you process information is just where you start. It's not where you end. It doesn't mean you can't
Mm,
do all the other ways of processing on the spectrum of processing. It just means this is where you start. This is how you take in information. Now let's learn how to translate it into different forms. And I help people translate in pictures, but there's all sorts of experts in all the other areas. Community. That's how we learn to grow that spectrum,
right?
right?
Well, how did I want
I
to
love
know how
that.
you got into it, Laura?
Okay. I had to do this for myself as a child because nobody understood what I was talking about half the time.
Okay.
So
So
it
what
was
would you
a
do?
necessity. So oftentimes I would just like sometimes I would use picture books. So I would use the analogies from the picture books. I would be like this, like what they're doing here, or like what this character did. And so I found myself using analogies, which is a form of visual processing because you can hold that image in your mind. You're thinking about how that character does things, and then you can explain it to other people, and you have that common visual that you shared together to
Right.
be able to communicate. I
Mm.
also drew tons of pictures. I made little like love notes and checklists, which is funny because my kids do this for me now. But like if I couldn't quite articulate what I needed, I'd kind of chart it out and then give it to my parents to check yes or no or circle this or whatever. So like interactive. I also made tons of little worlds all the time. So that was more of like an internal processing. So if people just didn't understand me or I didn't really know what was going on or I didn't want to be around people at the time because it was overwhelming that I couldn't communicate in the way I wanted to,
Yeah.
because I also was like very aware of what I wanted to say, and then also that I would like didn't have all the experience to say
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
Um, so I would make little like paper worlds and all sorts of setups and on the floor for hours. So
I
I have tons of
love
pictures
that.
of them. Yeah.
Right? Oh, that's powerful.
Hmm.
It is I'm thinking about it especially because, like I said, I mentioned, Sophia, and it's highlights, but it's also Cricket. Do you know those magazines?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
it just I love them so much even as an adult. Like, I'm having so much fun reading them to
Mm.
Yeah.
and looking at the pictures and seeing the power of that visualization. And to me, it deepens the story.
Hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
of course, this makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I
And
think
so
it's
you, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I notice a lot that like grown-ups will say, I get to play like even though play is for kids, as an adult I get to play too, or even though picture books are for kids, sometimes I enjoy pictures, but everything was visual first, and then we made language. So really, like we all understand visuals. We see our surroundings. Nature is visual and shows us through analogy and through like what we see how to do things, and we demonstrate. Like that's how we started. And then language and all of that stuff that's considered more intellectual often has become like the go-to because it was later evolved thing, I suppose, or also systemically, it's hard to access a lot of things like education and learning to write and read. So it's higher up, but art and visuals, it works for us all to like help us understand. Not all of us know the skills for like making it happen when we want to create a visual, but we can definitely understand visuals in our own unique way. Even if without those without sight, also when they hear an analogy or they hear a sound, there's kind of visual in their head, even if it's a unique sort of visual. So all of us have that way of getting something out of a visual that would be in picture books or other things. And I think people forget that it's an adult thing as well. It's like it's a human thing to see and enjoy the beauty of things.
Right.
Hmm.
I love that. Now, when you're working with leaders specifically,
Hmm.
because like I love this. I'm a doodler. I'm visual. Like that's my go-to. I'm a visual and kinesthetic learner first, and audio's on down, which is hysterical since podcast is my medium. But that's a whole nother story and a whole nother episode. But when I can imagine there's some leaders that think, "Oh, I couldn't do that," or "Oh, I'm not creative," or "Oh, because we have such stigma around what drawing or art or illustration is. Where do you start?
Yeah, so usually when I meet people like that, they're hiring me to do it for them so that they can bypass that entirely. But also, when I'm talking to people like in my community who are trying to put something together and they start by apologizing, like, I want you to take a look at this. I'm sorry, I'm not an artist or I'm not very creative. I just talked to them about how they built up the skill of being able to write their letters and being able to, you know, make checklists and stuff. So it's like it's really just practice. Like the professional artists have practiced the most. They liked it when they were kids. They practice and they practice and they practice. And doodles are just symbols, and we can draw symbols because we can draw letters. And then some people joke if they're doctors or something like, "Well, I can't even draw letters." I'm like, "Well, I guess you don't need to doodle then." And that's where that is. You're a doctor. You can go do your thing. Um, so yeah, it's either I say like you don't have to learn if that's not something you want to and you're feeling super resistant. But if it's like I wish I could, but I can't, then just start drawing symbols. I teach them how to draw the shape of how to find the shapes and things. I think what's intimidating for people is they see the end result and they try to make the end result happen. But a lot of artists start with just the lines. Like even I'm sure you've seen in Disney sketches and stuff for the characters, it's like circles with a line through it and all these wiggly lines, and then they go back over it and then back over it again and then back over it again. And then other people take it and go over that. And so it's like a lot more layers than people realize. So I remind them that like you can write your letters and the professionals are making many, many, many marks and practice hours. So if you really want to do it, you can. You keep making the marks and they get easier over time.
I love that. But I also think they're making more mistakes, right? Because if you're doing it more, then you're making more mistakes. And when I think about and more opportunities to continue to get better, right? So when
Mhm.
I think about intellectual wellness recently, that's what I'm thinking about. Like, what is our relationship with learning new things? Do we feel like we can't? Are we coming from a place of can't, or is it a want or a skill thing? It's, part of what I've been thinking about, but also what's our relationship with failing?
Mhm.
Is it that you don't like to be an artist? Because I know my birds look like it's like a line with a little dip in the middle and then another line, and that's a
Yeah,
bird, right?
right.
But isn't that the most beautiful word? Unless it's somebody's criticism or a comparison that's stealing your joy, you know? So I love when you say I get to play again and helping adults remember that playing is allowed for you too. Pictures are for you too. Because I think sometimes we separate it because we don't want to fail or we um, are nervous about how we feel about learning something new.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up too, Shannon, because I feel like there's a stigma about how
Yeah.
real art is only the art that looks like the real thing, but
Hmm.
that's not actually art at all. Art is mark making and communication and observation, and it starts a dialogue.
Mm.
And that's all it's intended to do, whether that's a dialogue with yourself or somebody else. So a lot of people do judge themselves like, well, this doesn't look like a real bird. It's like, well, we don't necessarily need to do that anymore. We have cameras that take pictures and real birds. So like make your mark
Yeah.
and move forward, you know?
So,
Mm.
Laura, something you just said really jumped out at me that I think I'm understanding your work in this way. And I want clarity and I want to just make sure I'm on the right track. You said, even if we're making marks to better understand ourselves. So, this is like the piece of your work that's different when you from other people and using art in different ways. You're encouraging people, especially leaders, to use visual to understand what they're trying to say or build or vision, or am I right on that?
Yeah, it's a mix. So I have, it depends how they process. So some people come in and they have ADHD or they're a kaleidoscopic thinker and they have trouble communicating. So we start with getting to know themselves through mark making. They already have the visual. We just get it out onto the paper and figure out how to explain and like use that to help them stay on track and explain things. So a lot of people I work with, they specifically have ADHD. And so we follow that method. And then I help leaders who work with people who are visual thinkers and have trouble communicating, how can they use their linear tactics of how they usually talk to people and how it usually works pretty well for them because it's the most common way that most leaders are taught to talk to people, and how can they open the door for those who have to use visuals to think, like how can they open up a whiteboard and just feel brave enough to just start sketching out an analogy, just start playing with it and not feel like they're less than because they're not in their comfort zone like talking at someone, or even the coaches who come alongside you and they give you a big Google Doc and you're going through it. The people who are visual thinkers are lost and they've lost focus there. And there's a range of visual thinking, and ADHD being on the pretty severe end of like, you've lost me after the second line of text. It is a combined self and others, because I think you learn about yourself from learning about how other people communicate too. That's why we need diverse communities to learn about ourselves and where we fit. And also, um, we take it one first depending on what they're coming in as, like what their current strength is. A lot of people already have a way they visually support people. They might not know it. So we'll discover what that is and then add some more visuals to it because there's so many more than just drawing pictures. So.
So can we go more into that? What are some ways that and I might be, I don't I'm counting myself in another category other than like a visual learner or visual
Mhm.
thinker. I think I do think that way. I don't know if it's my main one. What
Mhm.
are things that I can do to support a team member that's more in the visual learner side of things? Christine says
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, I think it does depend on what you're helping them with. So
Okay.
let's say you were doing Shalo Glow and people weren't quite understanding why they need to take care of their skin.
Yeah.
You can provide like a lot of visuals or examples. So
Mhm.
just remembering like, oh, I can like take a screenshot or a snapshot of this example of like how maybe they don't know how to use it, or like asking questions of what's not making sense and then showing an example of that. That's like pretty simple to find on, and people are used to that where they can go find a social account or somebody's using it, somebody made a reel using it and you can share that.
Yeah.
But my favorite is the use of analogies. So especially if you're working with someone who has ADHD, you can find out what their favorite Disney movie is or their favorite place or a hobby. Say they love gardening. Gardening is a great analogy for different things, for so many things, especially in business. And
Yeah.
so using that analogy to help them work with him because it provides a boundary if something doesn't make sense, it's going to be very clear. For example, if you're talking about gardening for marketing and you're like, okay, you're tilling the soil and planting the seeds, and so you want to be into, like, you want to know what seeds you're planting and what those seeds need to grow. And when you're like working in that analogy with someone, they can see, oh, I think I need to like water this more, I'm not even showing up. Or like, oh, I planted sunflowers and I'm doing like shade type work over here, so this is, and it like, in the analogy they can see what's right and wrong because it's a clear story that we all connect to. But um, and the more complex things kind of lose their edge in that analogy, and you can kind of see where it would
Right.
fit.
Absolutely. I love that. And especially with the prioritization, that's something else that I've been thinking
Mm.
about. So I've been thinking about our relationship with learning things new, right? Our relationship with failing and how we approach that, but also prioritization. Because, like you said, sometimes okay, this is the result that you wanted. This is the flower that you thought you were going to see, but this is the seed that you planted, or this is what you're actually spending your time on right now. That might inhibit the growth over here, is something that you already started. So as I'm doing these three businesses, it's like, okay, wait a minute, this is actually first. I know I really want to do these things. I'm really excited about it, but when you look at it at the context and when we're talking again about capacity, what do we have the capacity to do right now?
Mhm.
How should that play out for myself and how should I articulate that to the team? Um, to think about those in more visual ways, I think makes me more excited about it instead of these things have to be done by this time and this is the expected result.
Right. It's inherently more playful too, because to
Yeah.
show it, you have to be vulnerable, like whether you're
Hmm.
acting it out or doing role play or showing an example that isn't you, or showing by example and demonstrating you're
Hmm.
being vulnerable, and even doodling. And it's a vulnerable spot. And so I think people kick it out of the leadership realm if it's not a chart or something that feels more tidy and like they're going to look smart, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But I think as people learn to care for people in this more creative way, it helps you think about what you do also, because if you have to explain it in more ways than just your typical text or
Yeah.
audio, then and you're showing it, you might discover some things that you might not have been explaining well, or
Hmm.
something like that.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Hmm.
This whole subject just tickles me. I just laid out in my head a whole Women Connected Wisdom garden, just so y'all know, in that last segment, and what needs to be planted and what goes where. And to your point, Shannon, like the capacity to me is how many acres do we have to plant? Like what is our boundary? I love this whole
How many
um,
acres do we have right now?
I don't know. Like, we got to talk about it. We got to
Let's talk
discuss
about
it.
it. Okay.
Right. And you
But
can make activities out of it, which is fun. So you're like,
Yeah.
right?
okay, you can just cut it out and build a little orchard. Like there's
Mhm.
Well,
your.
right? There's
Mhm.
the Connected and Wisdom Press. There's the
Mhm.
community. There's the well, I just think about also how much this tickles me as somebody who identifies as a visual learner and somebody that identifies with ADHD, that I get excited. Like I was at my dad when my dad was in the hospital, I walked out of the hospital room and there was a visual map of their care team. Like it was their values, but it wasn't just written, it was visual. And I was so excited I took a picture of it because it was beautiful, but also like I'm realizing as you're talking, Laura, like that lights up my brain. Like I see that, I instantly connect with it, I understand it versus if I would have seen it just in the written word. And I love to
Mhm.
read and I love the written word. It just lights up different parts of my brain differently. It's like, oh, and I think it deepens my understanding of
Mhm.
what is happening. So I love that there are people like you out there that teach people how to do it and walk alongside of them to do it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do love that, because of the play aspect of creativity. I think when you see that somebody took the time to make it into a visual for you, when that's less common, you're like, "Oh, this is for me," or "This is like cool. I should look at it." It's a new way of seeing this. When in a hospital, they don't typically have all of that.
That's a good point.
Mhm.
So, if when you're working with the perfect type of person that needs your help, what's like the biggest challenge that they face that you help them with?
Getting their ideas untangled. So that's like my main thing that I do with them at the beginning of every process. I call vision mapping, but it's taking all of their usually they come to me, they're like, I have an idea, but I just don't know how to like articulate it, or it's just all up there and I got to see it in front of me. And so we literally just brain dump it out and then organize it into an analogy. So once we've brain dumped, I think that's the difference. Like a lot of people brain dump it and then put it into lists or something like that. And then the lists are fun and a little bit exciting because now you've got it a little bit more like, organized, but they're still kind of overwhelming because it's a lot of lists. But if you're like, I know one person that I worked with, they had all these ideas for different business ideas and they wanted it to be a multi-passionate thing. So we came up with the idea of an estate, and like, here's your estate and here's the different guest houses, and how will they know how to get to each guest house? Like, what makes this work? Is it a mysterious one where they don't know till they get in and that's the perk? Or is it like, the fun about an analogy too is you get to make it whatever you want. You don't have to be like, all castles and estates are this way, so it must be like this. You can like, it's my castle's like this, and then you're just excited about it. And when you add things, you know where they go. So vision mapping is built around analogy, and then we pull out the action steps of, because most of these have kind of a journey, like a journey into the estate or a journey around the garden. And so we start at the entrance or the reverse, depending on how they want to, tackle it. And we come up with the action steps. So the hardest part, which is the most fun for me, is taking those ideas and putting them in an analogy. And then they just keep going. Like the ideas just keep going and organizing on their own, because now they have this bookshelf essentially in their head of like where things are going to go. And it's a whole system. So that seems to be what most people are most excited about in the process.
Right? It's just fascinating to me, even as you talk about it. Like almost everything you're saying, I'm seeing the picture in my head, like of the bookshelf, and I was like, "Oh, ooh, yeah, I'm with you." Um, what I had a question, and did I completely just lose it? Well, when you're working with leaders and they come up with this analogy, they come up with this plan, do you walk alongside them? Do they go and do their thing and come back and circle back around with you? How does that work with your clients?
They get to choose where they want to land, because I have different services. So if I do vision mapping, they can just do that and say like, okay, good. Now my thoughts are clear, and they'll go on their way. And then maybe they'll come back when another big project is cooking in there, and then we make a new one. Sometimes that's all they needed, and then they can do that for themselves after. And then I have a community where people, if they don't have the budget to have someone make the visuals for them, they come in and they just ask tons of questions and get all of the analogies, and they show up, and we are in a community sharing ideas for how things could work, and where to collect visuals and how to put things together. So they'll go there if they want that support of me walking alongside them, but it's not me doing it for them, but they just want somebody to check in on them every once in a while. That's usually if they are creative, but they've lost the confidence. That's like a lot of that. And then there's also where I do it for them. And that's usually people who are like, yeah, this isn't my skill or something I want to spend time on. And so I'm going to have you come in, and we look at the whole process and we build it around like an intersectional lens. Like, who's the person who has the least amount of time, understands this the least, has like the lowest, reading level or experience in this area, and let's make it clear for them, and then build from there.
So important, and especially because a lot of times we can think that we don't know and then get discouraged, right? That was one of the chapters in our book by Satima Ra. You do know. Yes, you do know. And a lot of times we can get to a place, we get a little information, and it's like, ooh, I get stuck and then want to go back. Even us, we talk about our brand and the brand colors, the fonts. Did we use the right font on this graphic on camera versus that graphic on camera? And what I love is that you don't have to do it by yourself, especially as an entrepreneur. The point is to grow a team. So hey, if I'm great on the finance side and the product side, I need Laura to help me with the market side, because she can help me with the graphics and she can worry about social media and whatever goes in the email, and I can stay in my strength and the part in the business that makes me excited to come to work every day.
Yeah. And I used to do much more of the, like what you're saying with making the graphics and stuff. It's just we've
Yeah.
come so far online that like Canva works. So, like I do a lot of just showing people how to use what we came up with on Canva, because I'm like, you know what? There is a place for like going and getting everything completely professionally made, I guess, by like an agency or something. But
Right.
also that's like kind of a construct because we you just need to be clear. So
Yeah.
you only really need design help if your stuff is all jumbled and confusing and people aren't looking at it.
Mhm.
And a lot of it's just give it more space
Mhm.
and just simplify it and put it out there. It's better to
Yeah.
have just a white square with a really simple text in the middle and letting people know, than trying to come up with some like image that makes no sense
Mhm.
and or a random stock photo that has nothing to do with what you're talking about. Just having
Yeah.
the meat right there, is sometimes even better. So
Yeah. When I was a manager in hospitality, we would say, "Give me the baby, not the pregnancy. Just tell me what it is. We don't have time for all the buildup," you know? So I hear
right.
what you're saying. Keep it
Okay.
simple. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of what designers do. Like, it's just the skill of being able to not overcomplicate it and remove stuff.
Yeah.
So it
That
depends
makes
on the
perfect
vibe
sense.
you're going for too. Like, I know a lot of people. I had a client from Jamaica, and we made the the graphics were much more detailed than my usual work, but that was the general vibe and like how people were used to getting information in Jamaica. So that was the way that we were making the visuals. So it's
Yeah.
just like that doesn't always mean just white space, like super simple hipster
Yeah.
look. Like everybody's vibe is different. You have to know who you're talking to and how they're used to getting information as well.
Right. And that's what I meant about reaching out to the teams, reaching out to
Yeah.
an expert, or sometimes if that's something that you want to take off your plate, go ahead and bring somebody on the team for it because like we said earlier, there's layers, you
Mhm.
mentioned Shalo Glow. It's not just glass containers for glass, it changes the labels, it changes the way the product breaks down at landfills if they go there, it changes
Mhm.
a lot of different things and there's reasons behind why. And just like if we're talking about marketing, it's not just, am I a minimalist type of person or a person that likes a lot of flair and a lot of extra? It's about the target audience that's looking at your
Mhm.
stuff and how they're used to receiving information, even the type of information that you're giving them. Are you telling them about the benefits of a product or the benefits of this event that they're going to come to? Or are you telling them that you're going to be open or something else that might be a good reason to change up the way that you market it? That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, as a person who that sometimes in different social situations, especially as a creative, you like and tell me if I'm saying this correctly, your
Mhm.
interaction to be at different levels. How do you balance that?
So what I currently do, I mean, balance is an ongoing action, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
um, but what I currently do is I try to set up days that have the same sort of energy or counterbalanced energy. So if I'm doing my finances in the morning for my own business, I am not going to schedule a vision mapping session right after that. I'm going to go walk around in the woods or watch a Disney short. Um, and that will help kind of reset me because well, actually, the short answer for that is I have like the negative and positive of a battery. Like I'm always thinking about what might counteract whatever just happened. So if I'm having to do a lot of um, work holding thoughts still or something, then I'll do something where my mind can just completely relax and I'm consuming. So I just alternate consuming and creating. Um, and then there's like creating that feels like rest and consuming that feels like rest and then consuming that feels like work and creating that feels like work. So I just try to balance the rest and the work not by what the task is, but by how much my brain I have to work to hold it still, or even masking. If I have to mask for something and be somebody who I'm not, which I don't do as much anymore, but if I like, especially that's usually parenting. If as a mom I go in somewhere and I try to pretend like, okay, I just want to look like I have it together for a second and then go in and like that takes a lot of energy. So I try to plan my parenting stuff to be have a buffer as well.
That makes perfect sense. And
Mhm,
yes, thank you so much for that.
mhm,
What were you going to say, Christine?
Well, I'm loving this conversation
Yeah.
because I was thinking about our guest that we had on that was talking about sacred rest and
Hmm.
how when you do creative output, you have to have creative rest. And I love the way you're describing it with the analogy of the battery, Laura, and that how do we counterbalance that energy? And do we? I often will group task. Like if I'm going to be on, I'm going to be on, but then I have to counterbalance it with not talking to anybody, or I'm
Great.
going to read a book, or I'm going to binge The Great British Bake Off because that's easy to watch and I don't have to think, right? So I love that. I love that. The and what I was really receiving from that is the knowing of ourselves. Like
Mhm.
know what gives us that rest. Know what feels good and the different energies of the work and the creativity that we're putting out in the world. And the other thing I was thinking about earlier, Shannon, that I didn't say is you really have a skill with visual stuff with graphics. Like you may not think, "Oh, I'm an artist because I don't draw this or that," but your skill with our graphics and with Shalo Glow and the things that you bring in are
Mm.
fabulous.
Thank you so
And
much.
I see you thinking in pictures and supporting your work and your clients, and because you can look at them and go, "Oh, yeah, that's how I would use it." And
Yeah.
so I think that's
Thank you.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, all these connections. Laura's just making all these connections for me, and I'm getting really excited about it. I'm like, "Wow, okay, what can I do?" Um,
Oh,
Yeah, that's
y'all will
literally my
laugh because
favorite thing to
right?
do.
Well, y'all will laugh because it's not like I don't have enough to do with all these businesses we're running. But I'm reading this Cricket magazine to Sophia. I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I want to create a seek and find and draw the pictures and I was like, oh, I'm put that on the list, right? Because I do write children's books and I just haven't published a lot of them. And I was like, I don't know, but I really do think it's the visual mapping part of it. It's that visual part that gets me excited. It's like, yeah,
Mhm.
when and I don't know if we ever talked about it on the show, Shannon. I can't remember because we're on episode 99.
right?
Um, but for one of the Nibblings' birthdays, I did a children's book
Yeah,
about
you
my
did.
dad's farm, and I started with the pictures, and then I created the words and did it bilingually and things like that. But what I had in my head was the fact that you know I grew up on this farm. By the time the kids are where they can remember, they may not remember some of the things that happened to this farm. So I was like, I want to gather those pictures and that visual representation. So I'm just thinking about that. No big conclusion, but it was just like, oh, yeah, I think in pictures.
Mhm. Yeah, and this is bringing up something I recently was talking to. I think I was, yeah, I was in our Q&A session today in the OIC. That's the name of my membership, and um, we were talking about how it's hard to do visualizations and to do meditations, like for what I call kaleidoscopic thinkers, when the visuals are moving, because because it's a spectrum. There's also people who have linear visuals, and then over here is like the moving spaghetti noodle visual situation. Um, so we often have trouble doing guided meditations where we're supposed to be visualizing something, trying to visualize a goal or like what something's going to look like, and doing mood boards or like vision boards, which is funny because people think of those as visual things and they're like, oh, you're visual, you would be great at this. But it's because you're trying to put a new visual in over top of another visual that's already there. Is very difficult. So we usually have to reverse it. So I was talking today about having to do that, and just it's interesting to keep finding little ways that this stigma of like what creative people are like and what they should be able to do, where there's like on one side, like this is what a creative is, this like absent-minded professor type person, but on the other hand, expecting us to be super buttoned up and like linear and show up on time. It's like those those we can learn to balance all of those. It's not a lost cause. To know everyone wants to be well-rounded, so but assuming that people are good at things or not good at things just because of their profession or the way that they think, and it is interesting to see.
Right. Well, that brings up another question for me, Laura, not to put you on the spot, but I was thinking you attended our vision connected and vision party and doing the
Yeah.
vision board. How was that for you on doing it through the 8 dimensions of wellness?
Oh, I loved it. Well, because the way that I usually start is feeling is based on a general theme. So the 8 dimensions of wellness is nice because they are in of themselves. We went theme by theme. Um, and then what I do is I just go through magazines and through Pinterest and just let the pictures pop out.
Right.
Whatever kind of stands out. Like I put a donut on there, which at first, if I was like, okay, I want to be in circle, like I would not have looked for a picture of a donut. But now it makes me so happy that there's this
Right?
big
With
fluffy
sprinkles
sprinkled
on top.
donut
I
there.
love
And I'm
it.
like, I need to call my friends when I see the donut. And so, but that's the way I needed to do it. Whereas some people it needs to be a picture of women sitting in circle for them
Right.
to get that. So I think just, it's a lot of grace that we give ourselves for the way we do things. Before I had learned that about myself, I always had trouble at vision boarding groups, wanting mine to look like everyone else's and being like, I'm an artist, this should look better. But it's a process thing for me. It's not a finished product. But I liked that you guys had it in themes because that does make it easier for visual thinkers. Maybe because you yourself are one that you were
Right.
doing it in that way, but it
Yeah.
does help you think from all angles. That's what's nice.
Right. I also laughed when you said a picture because, when we do those part, I'm like, I would have 100 pictures. Like if there was time to put 100 pictures on my vision board, there would probably be 100 pictures. So I need the expert help of editing it down, right? Like, okay, you really can't do 1,000 things. So how about we just pick, 10?
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that is another one of the challenges that I run into a lot with the OICers is like, okay, let's brain dump let's go big because either they're afraid to have all of the ideas out there in front of them. They're like, that's too many. But they need to kind of see the big picture. How to allow yourself to switch between them to be like, okay, this picture is too big now. I'm going to zoom in here. And that doesn't mean everything's going to float away forever. It will come back around. I'll come back to it. And having ways that you can put pins in things to come back to them, especially if you have the moving pictures, you're like, I'm going to lose that word forever. I'm going to lose that idea, how to just like, how to switch in between the zooming out and the details as a skill. And you can use visuals for that too. But
Yeah, that's been super important, especially and when you talk about the intellectual was wellness, right? You were just talking about being a few years out or saying, "Hey, this doesn't have to be right now. This can be later." I realized that, and maybe we talked about it last week. I used to struggle with that. I couldn't see 5 years out or 10 years out, So, as somebody who likes to have goals and says, "Oh, I want to do all these things. I have however many books on the list." Let's be realistic and put a pin in it. Where should it go on the priority list? What are you working on right now? And then we can come back to it. That gives me peace. That gives me
yeah.
peace in some things.
And I love using Disney movies with my clients for that one. When they're
Mhm,
like, I want to do all the things. I'm like, okay, so if we're going on like a hero journey of building your business,
mhm.
a bunch of these things could not have showed up earlier in the movie. Like if Tekab came early in Moana, this whole thing would have been very scary and intense. Like she would
That's a
not
good
have
point.
gone. So like putting pins in things also helps the story come to fruition because you can't, as the heroine,
Yeah.
hold all of that at once. We
Yeah.
try to, but
Yeah, and that's the part that gives me peace, right? Had it came early, it wouldn't have been the right time. It wouldn't
right.
have worked out. Had it came later, it would have been a different situation. It would have, so just trusting that, hey, this is where I am. This is what I'm working on. This can wait, and it'll all work itself out.
Mm-hmm.
So, talking about things that we're working on, every week we do a wisdom in action, Laura. For your Lord, intellectual wellness, what are you doing this week for your wisdom in action?
Well, one thing that I've been doing is scheduling more coffee chats, which doesn't fit in the typical intellectual wisdom of our society, but I have found that I grow much more wise and intelligent the more that I speak to other people about what their goals are and their viewpoints of things just
Yeah,
over a beverage because we're
yeah.
relaxed, we're vulnerable and open about conversation, and I learn all kinds of new things like you were talking about at the beginning about this podcast, just talking
Yeah.
to other people. um, I think instead of having to make sure it's coming from a book from this particular place or making sure that I learned it in a class, like, yes, I'm going and getting a master's degree and I do like reading books and those things are important. But I think I learned the most from just having regular conversations with people.
Yeah. And, you're going to get a what? Where are you going?
Oh, yeah,
Give
I'm going.
give a little shout out to your win.
Yeah, I'm going to SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, starting
Yes.
in March. So I'm wrapping up a lot of like getting my business automated so I can really like love on people and do art school at the same time.
Yeah, and you know I love SCAD, and I was working with and have been working with SCAD since last year, and so for that to be something that you saw for yourself, to be able to do it, I'm super excited for you.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Absolutely. Okay, Christine, what's your wisdom in action this week?
I was sitting over here thinking about that because, Laura said coffee and chats, and I was
Yeah,
like, oh,
that's a good one.
yeah, let's
Yeah,
do that. Because that is, and it is intellectual wisdom. Like every
it
time I have
is.
a chat with somebody, I'm learning something.
Mhm, mhm.
So I think, what is mine? I think mine actually might be hashtag doodle more.
Mm,
Because instead of do more, I'm gonna doodle more because
I like it.
I am like I'm thinking about like that to-do list that I love to make because I love
yeah.
checking it off, but often I'll make the list and it goes away. But if I
Mhm.
have a picture with it or I have a so I'm gonna play with the hashtag doodle more.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think that's gonna be fun. What about you,
I love
Shannon?
Ooh, my hashtag it's always hard for me to choose one. I'm gonna say hashtag multi-passionate. I never heard that
Mm.
before, Laura. I like that. And when one time, like you said, one of your clients, this is too much. I had a vision board and it had like 4 things. This is like 4 possible career tracks. What do you mean? This is too much. And when you look now, I'm doing all of that stuff, you know? So, of course, yes to prioritizing, yes to pinning it, yes to the health of everything that we talked about. But multi passionate, definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun
If,
I
way to
love
be, I think.
and
It's not
if I
very
had
well understood, but it's fun.
Yeah. And if I had to do another one, I was on your social media earlier and you said hashtag curious, not judgmental. And I love that.
Mm,
So
mm.
for me, that ties into, again, being full time in the businesses now, setting up the operating procedures, right? I have my checklist, I have my list, I have my planner mapped out. And then whatever happens actually happens, right? So
Sure.
not judgmental, like, hey, if you're an hour behind, I was an hour behind schedule today, guys. If you're an hour behind where you thought you would be, you're still on time, and just be curious to why. See, is it more realistic to do it a different way, or do I need to change something in my habits that make it so that that's still a reality and that's where it needs to stay? I think I like that too. Curious,
Mhm.
not judgmental.
I
Yeah.
love that, Shannon.
Yeah.
Before we say goodbye, Laura, we didn't ask, is your community open to anybody? And if so, how do
Oh,
they
yeah.
find you?
Yeah, it just launched in November, so I think it wasn't even
Okay.
up when we talked last. But yeah, it's open to anybody and it's a learning environment. So we have monthly workshops, but there's also, it's divided into little camps. It's like you come to camp and you can go to the activity center or the self-care garden. And so we
Mhm.
have visual aids for all of it, for self-care, for working with clients, for working with yourself, for working through problems. And some people are just in there sitting in the self-care zone right now and they haven't engaged in any other way, but they're very happy. So there's so many ways. There's so
I
many ways
love
to show
that.
up in there. And you can find it by going to illustrative.us/OIC, which stands for Oh, I see. That's
Ah,
why it is named
I love
that.
that.
Um,
Okay, and we'll
yeah,
put that in the show notes so our clients can go check it out and
okay,
Yes.
and our
cool.
listeners and find that. This has just been such a fun conversation.
I
I love
agree. I've
this.
enjoyed it.
So, thank you so much for being
Yes.
connected, and we're grateful. And we want to give a shout out to Cecile Armstrong,
Mhm.
who is at the Inspired by Indigo community,
Yes.
who referred you to us. Was like, you need to talk to Laura. She's awesome. So,
Yeah, I
thanks,
think she's
Cecile.
rebranding right now too to everyday activism.
She is. That's
Yes.
Yeah,
right. Thanks for lifting that up. Yeah,
yeah,
we
Yes.
need to have her back on and have another chat.
It's
But
a good
yeah,
point.
so grateful to know you, Laura, and be in
Yes.
community with you. And yeah,
Thank
thanks
you
for
so
coming on.
much.
yeah. Thank you, Christine and Shannon. Thank
Okay.
Of
you.
course. Talk to you soon.
Oh my gosh, so fun. Like,
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
So many things I'm thinking about now.
What are you thinking
You
about?
know, well, I'm thinking about how we already interplay, like we use, and that's a form of this, right?
Yeah.
With movement and storytelling and voice. And I
Mhm.
was also thinking about using the illustrative part or the garden analogy with our business meetings.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know, I love that. I've shouted out alternate routes several times on the podcast before. It's an organization I belong to with our arts and activism meet, and
Yes.
they did their strategic planning visually, and
Mm.
because it's an artist group, and
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about that. Like, how fun would that be
Yeah.
to map out what we want to do this year and next year, but do it with visuals? Like, I don't know. This inspired me.
Yeah, I like
Oh,
it. I feel like it takes the pressure off of the result and just keeps you on, what do you wanna see? What do you wanna do? Let's have fun with it and play with the possibilities and see how we can get there.
right,
Yeah.
right. And they also just the flow, right?
Mhm.
I don't know. I love everything about it. Wow.
Yeah, it was great.
I love it. All right. Anything else you need to give a shout out to before we close for today?
Shout outs for let's see. If
Oh,
you are
wait.
here, what are you gonna do?
Next week.
Next week? Go ahead. Go ahead and I
Next
got
week.
one too.
Oh, next week. 100th
100
episode.
episode. Whoop whoop.
What?
We're gonna be 100. Yes, yes, and to celebrate, we're bringing you ladies even closer, right? So we're opening the
Mhm.
community. We've been talking about it for a while. Again, we could talk about a lot of things for about an hour, but there's a lot more places and places we could go and depths we could dive
Mhm.
into. So we're going to do that in our community,
Well,
and
and not just us. All the people we're
right,
connected to,
and all
right?
of our
I mean,
experts. Yeah,
all of our folks that have come on, our
yeah,
experts, people that can teach classes, people that
yes,
you can meet and talk with people. Like,
yeah,
there's so many people that you need to know.
yeah. Really, like the people that help you actually get the goals done. I think about our Manifestation Monday group and how we've been working on goals and wins. And then, like you said, the experts. I need somebody to help me through. I feel like some stuff, maybe with Shaylo Glow, like Laura was talking about, I feel like I've got the visual down packed. I have the brand book from SCAD, right? We're good. Connected in Wisdom Press. Let's go ahead and talk about some stuff. I feel like it's
Right,
still overlapping with Women Connected in Wisdom a little bit,
right.
so you can always plug into that expert and they'll help you in the dimension that you're looking for.
I love that so much.
Yeah, super
So,
excited. So
mm,
thank you again, ladies, for being here for all 99 episodes, the 11 seasons. We'll be here back with some goodies and some celebration for you live at 5 next week. In the meantime, be well, be wise, help you. I'll join in on dance with you. Be
right.
whole. We'll see you guys next week.
See you soon.